Do want to broaden things out, though. Welcome in our next guest. Joining us now, Anthony Saccaro, president of Providence Financial and Insurance Services. Anthony, great to have you back on the show here. Let's talk about the data. We've got labor data last week. We're going to get some more inflation data this week with CPI and PPI. And you say that the Fed is being pulled in two directions at once. What is our bigger risk right now? Cutting rates too soon and reigniting inflation, or waiting too long and then seeing the labor market weaken?
Well, hi, Marley. Thank you for having me. The bigger risk for sure is absolutely, without any question in my mind, the inflation story. The Fed has two mandates: keep inflation under control and keep the labor market stable. Labor market's been stable. It's come down a lot. It's softened, but it's softened from abnormally high levels where there were a lot more workers than jobs to now very normal levels. And we're in a low hire environment where the long-term unemployment rate is essentially it's actually increasing. So, but that's not their main concern. 4.3% unemployment is very, very acceptable. It's the inflation story that they have a problem with the CPI and the PCE around in 3.8%, I believe. And then you've got the hot PPI report that came out for last month, and that is a leading indicator showing that inflation is probably going to continue increasing. Now, most of that, of course, as we know, is due to energy. The question, though, is that temporary, or is that going to be more sticky? And the longer the war goes on, the longer there's not a resolution, the more sticky it's going to be. But there's been the opinion coming into the year that there were going to be a couple of rate cuts. And right now, I don't see how the Federal Reserve can cut rates at all. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see how Kevin Warsh handles the first meeting next week, especially if there are rate hike conversations on the table. But inflation is by far number one concern for the Feds right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, too. We've got Warsh's first meeting coming. Essentially, no change is what's priced in through the entire summer. If you look at June and July, it's in the 90s percentile in terms of what the expectation is. But once we get out to September, it's now 40% chance of a hike, only 1% chance of an ease. So, Anthony, as you're looking at this, if we see energy prices remain elevated through the summer, what's your expectation once we get through these first one or two meetings for Kevin Warsh?
Well, if energy prices stay elevated and inflation stays elevated, there's no way that he can think about cutting rates. I just don't see how it's possible. And of course, that's why Trump put him there, right? He's, he's very dovish, or supposed to be. I don't see that that's something that could happen. Now, with the stock market, though, I feel like it's overinflated. And for the first time in many, many years, I'm feeling like we could be getting into bubble territory. And there are some experts started to say that it's overheated. The stock market almost seems to be shoving off the fact that we've got high inflation, that the labor market is softened, that consumer debt is rising a little bit, that consumer savings is going down. We're in a consumer-driven economy, and the market's kind of blowing this off. It's almost like the market doesn't care, but at some point, it's going to wake up and care. And if it wakes up and cares, and we have a recession, or a correction, or a recession, or even worse, then, of course, that's going to give Warsh the ability to cut rates. But if things stay as is, I don't see him being able to do it.
And Anthony, with that setup, and a lot of people have brought up this, the market seems to be shrugging off a lot of things that historically it would not shrug off, particularly this pricing in of peace that doesn't seem to exist. We just keep kind of shrugging off that there's an ongoing war happening and the geopolitical risk tied to that. How are you positioning with that as the backdrop, and also with the argument that it would be very difficult to cut rates, so the Fed is likely not coming to the rescue here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it depends on your age. If you're younger, keep doing what you're doing. If you're older, it might not be a bad time to start taking some chips off the table. I think a good mix across the board, it would be AI for growth. That's a story that's going to keep going. Apple obviously has done well. They've got big announcements this week, and we'll see what that does. But the AI in general, I think, is a good story for growth. I think financials, with interest rates as high as they are, if the Fed can't cut rates, that's good for financials. I think for dividends and for stability, stability, financials are a good place to go. And then healthcare is good for the higher inflation because they can pass on the inflated costs onto their consumers. It's a good consumer staple to stay in the healthcare. So I think AI for growth, financial more for stability, and dividends and interest primarily, and then the healthcare for the inflationary offset as a consumer staple. I think those are good sectors.
All right, let's talk financials first. There have been some concerns about credit quality, about loan growth in this space. Do you think those concerns are overdone right now?
Well, I think right now, yes. I don't think that there is a significant concern right now, but I think looking forward, there could be concerns. As I mentioned a minute ago, consumer credit is climbing and consumer savings is lowering. The reality that is that when you look at the fact that the US economy is GDP driven by consumer habits, when you start to see defaults start to rise, as is happening, ultimately that could be a problem. But I don't think it's a problem right now.
All right, and then with healthcare, where are you seeing the most opportunity in that sector? Last week we saw the insurers performing really well. United Health had a great week. Humana had a good week. Where are you looking in that sector?
Well, I think with regards to healthcare, the unquestioned opportunity in my mind is with all the weight loss medications. They seem to be doing really well. And as an RIA, I can't mention names, but some of the big names out there seem to be doing really well because that is, I don't know if I want to say the craze right now, but it's working. And these healthcare, these weight loss medications weren't initially developed for weight loss. They were developed for other things, but they're finding out that in the process of trying to cure or help some of these other diseases, that, by the way, you lose weight at the same time. So there's a huge number of benefits for these weight loss medications outside of just weight loss. They weren't even designed for weight loss as far as I understand it. So I think when you pursue companies that are in that space, I think it's really going to pay off for you long term. But you got to choose the right companies.
It's one of my favorite things to talk about, the ongoing hype around GLP-1s, and they certainly don't seem to be going anywhere. That conversation persists and has been. But let's do AI. That was your third area here in tech. As you mentioned a potential bubble, which obviously we have to have AI as a part of that conversation as it's the primary driver in the market right now with big tech. How concerned are you about the aggressive capital spend that we're seeing? And if we stay in this higher for longer environment, is that one of the budgets that gets cut first, or is that sort of the last budget any company is going to touch?
Well, that's part of the issue right now is where do these AI companies put their money? And I think you can look at these AI companies in really two camps. You've got the companies that are putting tons of CapEx into the AI development. And then you've got companies that are actually using AI and maybe building out some of their own things, but you've got companies that are using AI to help actually make them more efficient. It's these companies that are using AI that I think might be the more stable play. If you're focused on companies that are going to give you that are focused more on CapEx, that could be a problem. And it's some of these companies over here too that have laid off some of the workers, so they've got more money for that CapEx that they want to put into AI. So I think that's not a bad space, and there's still room to run. If we have a correction, though, you have to be aware that AI usually leads the correction down. And if it gets worse, usually the IT space usually leads down and usually leads up. So there's more risk in these areas, no matter which way you go. But if you're focused on companies that are really putting a ton of CapEx into AI, that's going to be more risky than if you're focusing on companies that are really using AI to be more efficient.
A great look there, Anthony. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and nice to have you back on the show. Anthony Saccaro, president at Providence Financial and Insurance Services.